This is the Board of Finance special meeting, Thursday, March 31st, 6:31. Please note this meeting is being conducted using electronic equipment in compliance with state law, Public Act 21.1. As such, the meeting is being recorded, will be available to the public in compliance with state law. If you are attending remotely, please remember to mute your microphone once you are speaking. Anyone participating remotely should state their name and title, if applicable, at the outset of each occasion that the person is speaking. All votes taken, which members of the body are participating remotely, should be taken by roll call unless the vote is unanimous. Chat feature will not be utilized nor considered during this meeting. So let's get right into it. And we'll do a quick roll call. Jane Krishnavi. Jane there?
Don't believe so.
Okay, Steve Kirsch.
Present.
Rebecca O'Donnell.
Here.
Greg Benno.
Present.
Mary Hall.
Here.
And myself, Mike Manches. And I know we've got the Board of Ed here tonight. So we've got the superintendent and Ron. Are they in the room there or the?
Yes, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm here.
No problem.
Ron's here.
Great.
And I have
Thanks. All right. And we've got the first selectman as well. Ken?
I'm here.
Beautiful. All right. We did have public participation on the agenda, so we'll jump right into that if anybody from the public wants to speak. I'm not seeing anyone there. Anyone online? All right. Hearing none, we'll get right to it. We're going to jump right into the Board of Ed. I know he's got a couple quick slides to go through, so we'll let him do that, and then we can dive into some questions.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I know there's folks might have some questions, and I just want to first of all, I want to thank, we have a number of Board of Education members that are here tonight. And I want to thank a number of my staff members who are either here or who are on remotely. So, and I would encourage anyone, if if I misspeak or whatnot, feel free to jump right in. That's what it is. It's a workshop, so jump in. I know, Mike, in talking to you a little bit, you didn't want necessarily a full presentation. I just took off a couple of helicopter view slides. Sorry, yes.
Okay, thanks.
A few slides that kind of give a helicopter view of the budget. The first slide just kind of shows where we are right now and how we got here. My proposed budget to the Board of Education was $64,800. It was an increase of 5.39%. When the Board of Education workshops were done and when we passed it out to the first selectman, it was reduced by about $400,000 for an increase of 4.75%. But while we reduced the budget, we supplemented some of that budget, most of that $400,000, using grant funds from the ESSER 2 grant and the ARP ESSER grant and the ARP IDEA grant as well. So we used just shy of $400,000 to offset that. So it really kind of left the Board of Education initial request intact. There were a few things that the Board of Education asked, so there will be a little bit of work for us to do. We talked about adding a tutoring program to help accelerate learning for those students who, obviously, the pandemic, created problems for the last couple of years. So we're looking at tutoring programs across all of our schools. You probably don't have to go too far to hear about the mental health issues that are really endemic to the entire country right now and students. One of the things that is included on here that was not in the original budget was a social emotional program through the Yale School for Emotional Intelligence called Ruler, and then the addition of 0.2 school psychologists. So basically what the Board of Education did was reduce the budget by about $400,000, offset that, with the plans of offsetting that with grant funds, but also adding these couple of programs in. So we'll have to do a little work, to find out, what we'll have to we'll have to trim to get those programs in. That's to the tune of about, I think we've said anywhere between like $150,000 and $170,000. The next slide is, if you have it at home, the next page here. Again, I just showed a few quick slides. This is the one that I know I've spoken to this board a lot. We've talked about enrollment and the pressures that that's put on the school system over the past couple of years. This really kind of gets to the crux of that, and without going into every single year. If you just look at the 21-22, the current school year, we're currently at 3,366 kids with about 267 certified staff members. If you go back in time, from 12, 13 up to the present, you'll notice that for about 7 or 8 years, our student population decreased. I always credit my predecessors because as student population was decreasing, they made appropriate reductions in staff, usually through attrition and retirements and whatnot. Staff was decreasing kind of commensurate with student enrollment. But then we've had this big jump the past couple of years. I keep joking at all the PTOs that I go to. I say, well, there's a lot of yellow license plates. A lot of folks moved here from either down county or from the city, as a result of the pandemic. So if you look at where we are in terms of total students now and total staff, you would have to go back to about the years between the years 13, 14 and 14, 15. And, that's when we had relatively similar numbers in student population, but we had between 10 and 13 more staff members. So that's a big battle that we're, that this budget is trying to address, because a lot of this budget is geared towards, staff. The next page shows a very similar trend, kind of mirrors what I just talked about. And this is our special education numbers, our October 1 enrollments, and it shows the same thing. In 14-15, which is as far back as we can go to get data, but we have 367 students receiving special education services with 35.2 staff members. In the current year, 21-22, we have 504 with a half a staff member less. So this budget tries to address that issue. I won't go into the next two slides. I won't go into every single request unless people have questions about specific ones. I know you don't like us to get too much into the weeds on particular line items and staffing. I'm happy to address any of those things. But I just wanted to have those. One thing to note in those staffing request lines, if you see the items that have either an asterisk or 2 asterisks or 3 asterisks, some of those requests, just so we're transparent here, some of those are requests in next year's budget, but they're actually current staff members that we had to add this year as a result of increased staff that we used. We're fortunate that we were able to use ESSER funding, ARP ESSER 2 funding to hire, and ARP IDEA funds to hire all these staff members. So we're trying to get them into the budget next year, trying to avoid the fiscal cliff as much as we can, and trying to use that grant money to try to smooth that transition out as best as possible. And if you look at the non-certified request, so that first page is the certified request. The next page is the non-certified staffing request. Same thing, you'll notice that some of those positions with asterisks, those are positions that are, we have people in those jobs right now and they're just being paid through through grant funds right now. That we're trying to get a lot of that, less $396,000 from the ESSER grant into the budget for this current year. Those ESSER dollars run out, I believe, Ron, it's 2024.
24, right?
So we believe that's when they run out. So we use roughly half of the remaining ESSER funds that we had available. So that 396,000 that we're using, we have about another 396,000 left. So I'm happy to stop there with that piece. And if you want me just to go in and address some of the questions that were sent to us, I had some of the questions I didn't totally understand, and maybe we could kind of dig in a little deeper, and I think we can answer them. I just wasn't exactly sure what the nature of a couple of the questions were. But how do you want me to proceed? Mike,
Yeah, I know Mary and Steve both sent in questions. I think, we spoke, I think we can talk to Mary about getting because I was a little unclear on Mary's questions too, so maybe she can just elaborate on those for us and we can hit that and then we'll dive through Steve's list. If that's all right, Mary?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, Joe. So, thank you. So my first question was, that you put the budget in at 64.8, and it went to the town selectmen and it went to the town council at the 64.4, and they approved it without taking anything down. So my question is, and I'm just asking this because I want to make sure, or I want to feel comfortable that the 64.4, I would assume, has got enough of dollars in there that you feel you have room to cover some unexpected. I know we're not going to go through line item by line item, and it's not the Board of Finance's responsibility to do that. But I would like to hear from you and your colleagues. Do you feel that you have a comfort in that 64.4?
Thanks, Barry. And, first of all, thanks a lot for just referencing the fact that, I talked about how we got to where we are, and I didn't credit the first selectman, because you're right, the first selectman has left our budget intact to where it is now. Right now, the budget that we put forward I'm very comfortable with it. If we're using, I asked for 64.8, we got 64.4, and we're using grant funds for it. So I'm I'm comfortable with where we are. Could an emergency happen and, we have to scramble, but there's nothing right now, catastrophically looming that gives me pause for that.
I think the only thing we want to address later, Mike, and I've broached this subject with you, is a contingent for fuels.
And, we discussed, and to Mary, to your point, one of the things I talked to them about also was we've tried to, over the years, cover emergencies and kind of find ways to plan for the unforeseen, which was, special ed was always one. So we created a fund for that. One of the things I've been discussing with Joe and Ron, and he's going to give us a little presentation tonight on, is I think there's a big risk in fuel because right now we don't really know where fuel costs are, but they're exceptionally higher right now than they were originally planned for. And that could be a big risk come, Christmas and the winter time could be expensive and a lot more expensive. And I don't want to really see the Board of Ed take a hit because fuel costs go crazy, which is something they can't control. So one of the things we were throwing out the idea on, and we'll talk about a little later, is possibly creating a contingency in the budget for fuel on both the town side and the Board of Ed side, because it's a big risk factor in my opinion right now. But I think other than that, I think the Board of Ed was left whole by the first selectman, which is great. It's certainly my intention to try to leave it whole as possible and possibly do this contingency idea just to mitigate that risk from the Board of Ed side, something they have no control over. Diesel fuel is going to be what it's going to be, and heating oil is going to be what it's going to be. And we really don't know what that is going forward. So I'd rather prepare for that and then move forward.
So Mike, thank you for that. And Joe, thank you for that. So just, I just want to wrap, this question up. So do you have any cushion in any of the line items? And if so, what percentage of that total line item would be a cushion? Because I would think you would be more on the conservative side, budgeting. So.
Yeah, and I'd say we're on the conservative side. I don't think we've built in any kind of contingency or cushions.
Yeah, no, there were some unknown. Yeah, there was an open transportation contract. We budgeted at the high end of the range, and it kind of came in at the high end of that range, unfortunately. We had some retirements that were pending. We did budget a contingency for that. We may have to tighten that up over the next week or two. there's contingency, but it was contingency for the unknowns. I don't think there's going to be big changes one way or another with those, Mary.
And one of the things that we've done over the years is try to get out the fluff that was in the budget. And so there's really not a lot of extra room in this budget. And typically there hasn't been, which is why we've been willing, when things do come up, to try to supplement where we had to, or cover them on certain things that are unknown, because they don't build in a lot of fluff in this budget.
The only other area where we have contingency that I can think of is in health insurance right now. And we're still waiting for that number to come in. I mean, the contingency that we built in reflects the projection that we were given at that time.
Mm-hmm. And
actually, we were given that projection after we put the contingency in.
Okay, thank you. So on my second question, then it would be the opposite. So in the unforeseeable a potential overspend of the 64.4, including anything that you may have put in as contingencies, if you would go over the 64.4, okay, because I'm sure you put some thought into this as you were preparing, where would you pull back to cover that from the other line items in the budget as it stands today? Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, one of the things, that I think even my predecessors have done is always try to, keep any reductions as far away from kids as possible. In the past, if we had situations where we were, in jeopardy of going over, and that's what I kind of put this scenario that you're expressing, and we had to go into a freeze. A lot of times, again, we try to keep it as far away from kids as possible. And what's as far away from kids as possible? Staffing, teachers specifically. So a lot of times, we'll freeze and we'll hit those supply accounts and maintenance accounts. But it's a dangerous thing to do because we know that an ounce of prevention or an ounce of maintenance goes a long way down the road. So, but to answer your question, those would be the types of areas that we would look to hit first if we got into those situations. Hopefully we won't. That's another area where, in the past 3 years, we have really tried to build those line items back up to a place to allow our facilities team, Dan Crossick specifically, the capabilities to really maintain the schools as best they can and avoid the big ticket items down the road.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And my last question would be, if there would have been, or if there could be additional funding to your current proposal of the 64.4, where would you spend it on, Joe?
I think the first areas, this is a great question. I hope we have this problem, but say the superintendent's salary.
Exactly.
Maybe the assistant superintendent's retirement account. First thing that, takes off is, we have these few programs, like I said at the beginning, that we have to work in that we want to be budget neutral. So anything that we end up hitting there, we would probably touch there first. After that, we'd look at staffing. During the budget workshop process, we talked about, other potential areas down the road for us. I know we have some, I'll talk a little bit because Steve asked questions about study halls, but it really gets to the nature of our block schedule and, trying to, bolster our elective offerings at the high school. And looking at some support on the administrative end for our assistant principal. Our principal at the elementary level. Our principals are all by themselves at each school. One of the conversations that came up during the budget workshops was getting some support for those folks. So if you're given, we have to.
Nice.
Do you want me to?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Steve, you want to?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
I
Mike.
have questions, Steve.
Sure, Joe.
Yeah, I'll go through Steve's questions and then And your question 2 and 4, I think, are kind of interrelated. And again, I'll ask any of my staff to jump in. Steve's first question talked about risk to the budget. In my presentation, I talk about risk to the budget, and Steve asked if any of those risks have increased or decreased. And I include the risks and also sometimes the assumptions that we make about the budget. The biggest risk we've already touched on it already is fuel. I think that one, if there's one that's it's increased as of right now, that's definitely one of them. Enrollment, I put as a risk. As of right now, we seem to be trending okay. We keep talking about, did we see a blip the past couple of years, or is it a trend? And our kindergarten enrollment numbers are falling a little bit back in line with where they were, 2 years ago. Last year, we went from 87 students in kindergarten at Fawn Hollow to 125 this year. Right now, we're tracking, we have about, I think, 85 registered right now. It's still, shouldn't say it's early. The majority of people have definitely registered, but that registration process will continue through the summer. And then, there's always the unknowns, the unforeseen maintenance or emergency repairs, and the insurance. We're still waiting on that.
Okay.
Steve's next question talked about, during the budget workshops, talked about future needs of staff. For example, at Massick, there was talk about adding new classes or additional sections of existing classes. Please speak to this issue. One of the things that really hamstrings us at times with staffing is shared staff. We try to be really efficient, as efficient as we can with our staff, but sometimes you become so efficient, it creates inefficiency. So for example, in a lot of our specials areas, PE, art, music, those types of things, we have staff that are traveling all over the district, and it creates, while it's great, we're trying to get the most out of the people, contractually, every staff member is entitled, duly so, to a lunch period and a preparation period. And, so when they're traveling, those two things we can't tell them, hey, eat your sandwich on the road as you're going, from, Jockey Hollow to Fawn Hollow. So, that creates pressures for us. This budget, we're looking at adding some part-time staff members in those areas to really try to free up some of that stuff so they're not traveling, and we can, get our art teacher at the high school fully prescribed at the high school. A couple of other areas that we're looking at are career and technology education's electives. We talked about a little bit about electives, and I'm going to skip to question 4 because it addresses this stuff as well in a second. But we have a lot of students who are registering for personal finance in those classes, and we want to be able to offer that to as many kids as possible. So that would be an area. And then our humanities electives too. We're talking about that at the high school. Again, Steve gave me 2 questions, and I don't know if anyone saw it. Maybe gave me a few more than that, but 2 of the questions 2 and 4, I thought kind of went hand in hand. And Steve asked in question 4, during the board workshops, there was the discussion of study halls at the high school, and the number of students in study hall periods, and does that tracking data still exist? I can tell you, we could probably tell you how many kids are in study halls. I don't think that really tells the story, because some of the kids want study halls. What tells the story, what's happened, is I just want to explain the block schedule, and heading from an educationally sound perspective, the block schedule is the way to go. We're committed to it. It is definitely, it is definitely better for kids. But what we used to have at Massick was we used to have an 8-period day. But when part of my responsibilities as an assistant principal was to create the master schedule. And while we had an 8-period day, our 3 periods in the middle of the day, periods 5, 6, and 7, were reserved for lunch. So a kid would be in the cafeteria, for the full 45 minutes for a lunch period. So we really didn't have an 8-period day. We really had a 7-period day with 1 period for lunch. There were a handful of kids in the district. There were a handful of kids at the high school that would forego their lunch and take an 8th class. But by and large, kids opted into lunch, and deservedly so. When we moved to the block schedule, we Now we've embedded a lunch period within the third block of each day. So what happens is kids now have 8 classes that they can register for, or 8 periods they can register for classes. Let's just call them periods 1 through 4 on one day, and periods 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the next day. The third block each day, so the third block on the first day, period 3 and period 7, are technically the lunch periods. And there's about a 25-minute period broken in there for every kid to have a lunch. So there's 3 lunch waves during there. Now that's great, but what it has now done is it has now allowed our kids to take 8 classes. And in doing so, it's that many more sections that we have to fill around the school. So it's created a little bit of a challenge for us, and some kids have struggled. I'll give you a good example. I talked about personal finance already, and that's one of our more popular electives. We have 150 kids that want personal finance. We can only run 4 sections of it, so we can max out at 28 kids. So 4 times 28, you're going to get a little over 100 of those 150 kids in. Now, understand also that the scheduling software is designed to award seniority to kids. So the seniors kind of have the first dibs, and the juniors and the sophomores. So the majority of kids who may not get into that class will have an opportunity to get into it the next year. But if they can't find a second elective, though, they might find themselves in a study hall. And what we want to do, Steve, and I think it's to the heart of your question, is we want to give them as many opportunities to take classes as possible rather than sitting in a study hall. Getting those specialist teachers that we talked about, getting some relief there will help us bolster hopefully our art and music offerings and electives.
Yeah, and that's in the old days, it used to be like my kids had music, and that was a singleton. It was only offered period 5, exactly. Which meant that if there was some other class that was only given there, or they had something more important and something was given 2 sections, they couldn't get in to whatever that other thing was. And the discussion always was, how many of our students would prefer to be in an actual class but can't get in because of the scheduling and therefore in study hall. And the issue was, well, if we had more staff, we could offer, another couple of sections of whatever the hottest thing is that they can't get into. So I didn't know the ins and outs of block scheduling because I never experienced it, but that was, to the heart of my question.
Yep.
Is it staffing? Is it the ability to offer a few more sections of a handful of classes? That's sort of what I was interested in.
Thanks. Did I address it?
Yeah, I think so.
Steve had another question along the same lines about any needs that might exist as a result of the increased implementation for graduation requirements. The state of Connecticut used to have 20 graduation. You had to take 20 credits. There was a distribution of credits that you had to take. It used to be 4 English, 3 social studies, 3 math. I think it was 3 science, and then a number of electives and whatnot, PE and health. They've raised that graduation requirement up to 25 credits. It starts with next year's senior class.
Yes, 2023.
Yeah, the class of 2023 will be the first class that we had begun preparing for this. Actually, way back, I think when I was the high school principal, we started. We knew this was coming, so we had changed the graduation requirements from 20 to 22.5 to start to prepare for it. So we would transition to the 25. I don't see that as I don't see a need there for that. Our students generally graduate with 27, 28, 29.
Okay.
So it's not too big of an area of concern for us. Contracts that are in place, I hope I understood this question right, Steve. Contracts that are in place, start and end dates, including bargaining units, and I can send this as a.
Yeah, that's fine. My question, the reason I'm asking, not so much for this budget, but the board has talked about looking out multiple years and doing some planning. And so I'm interested in understanding, how many contracts and when do they run to? I mean, how many are we locked into already? As a more general question, not something necessarily for this budget.
Oh, but are you talking about bargaining union?
Bargaining units contract, a bus contract,
Yeah.
a food service contract. I mean, I'm not sure that I even
Yeah.
have a view of those.
Because the bargaining unit contracts, I mean, and I have a list, and I'll send it. I can say it right now, I don't know how well it'll resonate, but they're staggered. Like, for example, the teachers, their contract extends through 22-23, so next year, so we'll be bargaining with them. Paras and nurses are actually open right now. They were due this year. We're still in negotiations, so we're trying to finalize that. So they'll be this year for the next 3 or 4 years, depending on the contract. Librarians go out to 26, administrators go out to 24. Custodians, we start negotiating with them soon for 22. Secretaries go through 23. Then the bus contract, we just renewed our contract with the bus company. That's a 5-year contract. So that's 22 to 27. Food service was another area we put in, but it's really minimal impact on the budget. So that's going out to RFP this spring. And then talked to Darlene and Jen earlier today about special education contracts, and those are usually yearly contracts.
Okay.
With anyone that we have to contract with out for any kind of outside services. The next few questions are pertaining to capital and non-capital needs. So the question was, in prior years, was a list of non-capital equipment needs by school, things like vacuum cleaners, floor cleaners. Is there an updated list, and have those purchases been made or delayed, or why? So basically anything that's not considered a capital expenditure falls under our Board of Ed custodial operating budget. But what we did do is we used I think it was the first round of the grant funds, the original coronavirus relief funds. There's a lot of emphasis back then on cleaning to buy a lot of equipment. So we bought a number of floor machines and things like that. The next question was on the 5-year capital plan. It has the three school roof replacements, Jockey Hollow in 24, Monroe and Mass in 25. And Steve was asking if we've planned those, and if not, when do we start? And we talked to Dan today. Usually we'll start about 6 months to a year before. So actually, probably at the start of this next school year, because the Jockey Hollow one will be fiscal year 24, Dan will start working with the companies to work out the RFP to get the company.
Okay, so you're comfortable that those won't slip for, you've got the staff to handle it, you've got the schedule and stuff. My concern is I don't want to, if there's things we can do now to ensure that those dates don't slip.
Yeah.
Because we know how important the roof issues have been in the past.
Absolutely.
And that's really what was driving that question.
Yeah. I'm confident. I think if Dan, I don't want to speak for Dan, but I think he'd be confident.
You can.
Regarding the 5-year capital plan, can any of the non-roof and non-technology items be moved around to better balance the amount of spending year to year? For example, are there any items that could be moved into the 2023 proposed budget? I think you mean proposed capital budget.
Yes.
And that would be difficult right now, for a lot of those projects, because the timeline to get stuff right now, I'm kind of sick of saying it's times in uncharted waters, but I'm sick of saying supply chain and whatnot. But, the supply issues that are happening right now would make it really difficult to try, with only 3 months left in this year, to try to get something into the 20, to move something from another year into the 22-23.
Because a lot of they would have to be summer projects.
Most of them,
Yeah, that's what like the carpet and the library and those kinds of things. And that's fine. I realize that where we are, there's probably not a lot of runway, but I wanted to ask the question.
The one possibility that we did identify today could be the paving at Monroe Elementary, not so much Fawn Hollow. Fawn Hollow, there's got to be some engineering work that's got to be done there. Right now, Fawn Hollow, if you look at the front of Fawn Hollow, if you look at the parking area, it looks beautiful, it's fine. The problem is it was never graded. So when it rains and then in the wintertime when it freezes, there's a ton of ponding, and we have staff and parents and stuff that slip and fall there. Unfortunately too frequently. But the Monroe Elementary parking lot would not require that same amount of engineering. It's I think it's already graded to a place that they would be able to just go in, rip it out and put a new one on. So that would be the only one if, supply wasn't an issue that we could do it. Nothing else on that, right?
Yep.
And then the last question, I think we touched on this already. Please discuss concerns regarding student needs as a result of COVID, learning impacts, plans for that are in place for 22-23. And I know Mary had asked about the additional funds already too. A couple of things that we're looking to do, like I talked about already, the Board of Ed, and we all want to see our students, kind of, be able to get back to where they are. I really try to avoid the term learning loss because kids didn't lose learning in the past 2 years. They're just not, where they, might be, had circumstances been normal for the past 2 years. So we're talking about, tutoring programs at all levels. Talking about the social emotional program, Yale. What would be, the social and emotional program at Yale. And then, possible transition programs to help our kids make the transition from school to school, from the elementaries to the middle school, from the middle school to the high school. So those are some areas.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the only other question I had brought up, and again, we touched on it quickly there, was fuel, because it is a concern of mine. I think Ron had put some numbers together. I don't know if you have those at hand, Ron.
Yeah, I do, Mike. So,
Or if we wanted to touch on that then.
yeah, so the spreadsheet I put together, and actually I didn't put most of it together. Heidi handled the whole town side. But it encompasses electricity, natural gas and heating fuel, and gasoline and diesel. So it incorporates all those.
Energy, yep.
Yeah, energy, exactly. So Mike, you had asked what's the total budget, both sides for all that, all in is just shy of 2.2 million. So, as far as a contingency coming up with it, whether it's 10%, 20%, I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't, because I don't know where we're going to be next year. So, which is kind of why we need to provide for something. So, keeping it budget neutral by assigning fund balance to offset it, I think makes sense, and putting on the expenditure side within the Board of Finance contingency.
That's line. Yeah. Again, when we were talking over numbers, I was thinking, somewhere in the $250,000 range, just to have some, at least. Obviously, if there's an even bigger number, we can certainly make changes, but we're certainly flying blind here. But I just would hate to see, fuel put pressure on, having to cut services because of the oil costs and that kind of thing. And if we just put it on there, to me, I was comfortable at $250,000, but I would certainly open the floor up to anybody else who had a thought on this, or if anybody else is even comfortable doing it. It's just some place that I saw a weakness or a risk factor that we might want to mitigate.
So Mike, this is Steve. First question, does this budget on either side include an increase in energy costs already? And if so, what's that percentage?
So
It does quite a bit.
yeah,
It does. Yeah.
It does. So like on diesel, for instance, for school buses, there's like a $40,000 increase year over year.
Okay.
Yeah, where prices are right now,
Won't cover.
won't cover.
Right. That's the risk. So we did build in an increase, but I don't think anybody
Okay,
can sort
and that's sort of
kind
what
an
I'm getting
increase.
at, right?
And that increase,
Yeah.
yeah, that $40,000 increase on a percentage basis, it went from 132 is the current year budget we're living in, and it's 175.
Okay.
So so on the town side, we have in all items, gasoline, we increased almost 42%, diesel 36, heating oil 36. One thing was flat was propane.
Okay.
So we do have that, but that
Yeah,
said.
so there are significant increases built in, but
But
there's
to
still
that,
a risk.
to the other point, there is still risk. And I certainly, I support this approach, and I agree. I think the best way to do it is through Board of Finance contingency, because then you've got greater flexibility depending upon how things work out. And, it's never, it's a generic account. So you're also covering other contingencies as well. I mean, the earlier discussion we were having, I want to emphasize, we try to get away from line item contingencies on the town side. A few years back, like around maybe the time, never mind. There was a lot of contingency built into every line item. We're trying to like call that out and consolidate it into the Board of Finance contingency line. So I would support that. You guys looking into that and maybe bolstering that a little bit, that certainly wouldn't hurt.
All right, so I do agree adding contingency. My second question is, are we going to be locking in contracts or anything for fuel going forward, or is that all gone by the wayside these days?
So the consortium we're currently with, it's we're not locked in, and at this point, I don't think anyone wants to lock in.
Right.
So.
Right. And there's too much risk. I think nobody wants to take that on anymore. There's just too much risk, and there's not a lot of support in that. So I think it's a good idea. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in on their thoughts on it. And we could maybe just pencil that in and have Heidi pencil it in, finalize that. But
yeah, I mean, I think we should add more to contingency. I'm just trying to figure out how much more based on the fact that we've blown through a 40% increase already.
Right. Mary, you wanted to say something?
This is Rebecca. Mike, like, what was your thought around $250,000? Just because that was an even.
Yeah, when we were
amount?
going through the numbers, and you know what I mean? I think it's significant enough to make a difference, but not to send shockwaves through the budget either. I mean, again, we've got other ways of funding it, but I just felt like it's a significant amount, at least to make a stab at it. But I'm not locked into that exact dollar, but that was just kind of something I wanted to float.
Okay, gotcha.
That 250 provides a little over, probably about a 12% contingency over the current budget.
Well, we've got it ready, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mary, did you have something else to add there? I saw you raising your hand there. Oops, she's still on mute.
No, I'm okay. You answered
Okay,
my
great.
question.
Excellent.
And Michael, I'd like to ask one more question. Have you talked to any of your peers in any other towns to see what kind of contingency or what their thoughts are?
I have not.
And we can certainly do that as well. But
Certainly do that. Yeah, I can certainly do that over the next week.
And we don't have to make a decision tonight on the amount.
No, we can leave it open. We can let's throw it out there. Let's just put a note to not forget. But I mean, or if you want to pencil in 250 for now, and then we can revisit it next week if you want. I'm happy to do that and see if Ron can give us any more details.
Sure, I'm happy to have them pencil in 250 and it is
Rebecca, does that make sense for you?
It does, yeah. I like the percentages there.
Great. Okay,
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that,
Greg's
Mike.
good too? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Great. All right, good. Thank you, guys. All right, anybody have anything else for the Board of Ed who's been wonderful with us and we feel like we spent a lot of time with over the last 6 months, so makes it a little easier at budget season because we see them all the time now, which is kind of nice.
Might not like.
All right.
Thank you.
Joe and Ron, if there's anything else comes up, I'm sure we'll bother you again. But for now, until we hear from, healthcare or that is really the only other thing I feel like is open right now. That might make an adjustment. But other than that, I'm assuming we're going to stay the course at this point.
You got it. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Ron, what else did we have on our list to touch on tonight?
So I think you got capital roads.
They are on their way down. Chris will be right here in a minute. Just give him a minute. Heidi,
And the capital, while we're waiting for Chris, we can, I mean, as far as the capital goes, just so everybody who's relatively new is aware, we basically just review the dollar amount because every project that comes forward has to get brought forward by the first selectman, then goes to council, then will come to us on an individual basis. So this is as much of a placeholder as everything else, just to make sure that we don't have anything that falls off the radar. And we kind of have a long-term view. I really just want to have, everybody be comfortable with the range of dollars, which is what we say we always, giving to the first selectman and the town council, and then they'll pick projects to bring forward. Go ahead, Mayor.
Mike,
Oh, so Mike, your road folks are
Mary's
here.
good.
You want to
Yeah.
come back to capital?
yeah, Mike, could I just, what you said just now was very helpful in that I'm new. So I just want
Right.
to clarify so for my understanding. So the numbers that are in the capital budget as they stand right now for the upcoming proposal, that's what we're going to put into the potential mill rate. If there's an adjustment, it would be after that.
So the only thing we put into the mill rate is an assumed interest rate calculation and payment. So, that's the only thing that really goes into the expense. So based on what kind of that range is, we'll do an estimated interest expense and possibly a payment, but usually it doesn't hit the first year. So typically it really is relatively budget neutral in the year we're working on. It's more on the out years that it'll affect. And again, because it's on the list does not mean it'll get pushed forward.
Got it.
It's just, it's a guideline as much as anything else, just so we have an estimate, but it'll be covered in the bonding section.
Okay, thank you.
And Mike, just if I could chime in, I
Please.
understand that you're specifically addressing those items that are in the bonding column for funding source.
Correct.
But clearly, and everything you said is dead on, but items that are in the capital reserve or operating budget funding line do impact, those
Yes.
would impact the mill rate, and those other columns are all outside of the budget as well, grant or special funds.
Exactly. No, it's great clarification.
Yep. No, I just wanted to.
Perfect.
I do have one capital line item revision that I'd be happy the board to entertain. I can talk about that now, or if you want to go to roads.
Go ahead.
Chris and
Go ahead.
Dory.
We can just finish this up and then we'll get to roads. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the projects that is on the list is in the fire services. It's the Stevenson Rescue 320 refurb. The council, for all the fire apparatus, the council's strategic planning committee is going to be taking a comprehensive look at vehicle replacement planning and strategy anyway. But they agreed that the vehicles should be left in as placeholders at this time, the ones that were proposed and recommended. That said, for this one vehicle, which is in it right now at $415,000, there is certain equipment to outfit the combined vehicle that they're looking to create. This project involves eliminating, basically consolidating two current pieces of apparatus into one. And there were some remaining funds in a current appropriation for firefighting equipment that we were able to basically pick off in the current fiscal year. So that will come right off of the cost of this project because that equipment can be used in the combined vehicle. So we can reduce that line from $415,000 to $375,000. So I just, at some point, I'd want to kind of have you guys lock in that change so that,
Right.
when this goes out, it goes out in that fashion.
There was also on that same line, there was a Scribner's error.
Uh-oh.
The Rescue 320 should actually be 302.
Oh, geez.
It's 302.
And that was a finance error. So
Don't tell my
Take
son.
credit. There you go.
Okay, and that's all I
Great.
had.
All right. Appreciate that.
So Mike, we're sticking with capital. I have a couple of questions in general. The first question is, at the Town Council Strategic Planning Committee meeting, there was a packet of information for each of the projects that are in the capital plan for proposed plan this year. And it was really a very useful and interesting document to go through. So my question is, do we have similar documentation yet for things that did not necessarily make it into the proposal for the upcoming year, but, you know, that are in there for the 24, 25 fiscal year or others? Do we have any things that, you know, didn't make your cut?
There are some projects that were put in that are in future years, yes. And I don't know if not necessarily all of them, because we didn't necessarily go out
Right.
5 years. We are working towards, as we've talked about, well, I've talked about it more with the town council. Really what I want strategic planning to do is we're going to take I want that committee to take a more comprehensive, active role. And as projects are being submitted, that is the standard. I want that process to be vetted at that point before anything goes on the 5-year plan. So we kind of understand what it is, justify it, where we think it's going to come in at, and then decide where we're going to program it. But to your point, yeah, we don't. There's certainly some of those projects that were submitted, and we've decided, collaboratively that they can be in outer years, or they were submitted for future. They were submitted already with the intent that they would be in future fiscal years.
Do you know when the town council is going to start looking at those out year?
Other than talking about it conceptually, no, we haven't, there's nothing on a calendar yet, no.
Okay.
But we talked about doing quarterly capital planning meetings. That's been the intention.
Okay, that sounds good. I mean, I'd be interested actually in seeing the documents that do exist as a point of education. I found it very interesting and educational, and again.
No, it's one of the changes I made is to have a capital project request process that, kind of answers some basic information. Yeah.
I think it's great. And like I said, I'd be interested in seeing any of the ones that didn't make this year, but for which, people have submitted requests. My other issues are two issues or one issue, depending on how you want to look at it. The Parks and Rec department asked for two purchases, one for a field groomer, a ball field groomer, and one for a Toro 4000D mower. And my question is, since we have two Ventracs in the town, one's at the Board of Ed side and one's on the municipal side, when Parks and Rec was looking at additional equipment, did they consider simply adding on to the existing Ventrac? Did they consider making the Ventrac the platform of choice? And if not, why not? Because it seems like we've made the investment. This year, the capital plan had additional add-on apparatus for those two machines, and the strategic planning committee approved them. And they even jokingly said when they got to these items, well, isn't this why isn't this a Ventrac? And the fact of the matter is Ventrac makes equipment add-ons that do ball field grooming. And so I would like to know whether that was considered.
Yeah, I have to get with our Parks and Rec director to see, all the details of because your request just, came in this morning.
Yeah, I understand.
I haven't had a chance to really dive into it in a whole lot of detail, but I know that she worked with the park supervisor, and I know she's consulted from time to time with DPW as well. And I know that, the intent on the Ventrac initially came out, was primarily driven by wanting to have a more versatile snow removal piece of apparatus for sidewalks, particularly with the roundabout coming into play and everything else. So that was kind of the initial thought. It definitely has a lot of versatility, and they're making use of that versatility. But I don't think there was ever any intention to kind of put all their eggs in one basket and say, we're buying nothing but Ventrex anymore. They have a lot of Toros, I think 3 or 4 Toros, and I think they work well. I think you also have to consider the fact that, you know, if you're going to use, and again, I can ask her to get more specifics on
I'm just saying,
the logistics of it, but you know, if you put a ball field groomer attachment on the Ventrec, then that's the only thing it can do that day, right? And so then what do you know, you may need it somewhere else. So I think there could be some logistics in that, but I do know that they were relooking at some of this anyway, because one of the specific pieces they had their eye on may not be available exactly as positioned right now. So, and obviously, as Mike said, this is bonding, so it would, you know, come up later on anyway, but we may have to look at the specific piece of apparatus. So there may be an opportunity to dust it off and see.
Yeah, that's all.
If there's any new information in that regard, but.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody looked at it and said, hey, you know, it won't work, or scheduling's a problem or whatever, but it obviously appears that we've made good use of what we have. We're adding features to it to make, like on the Board of Ed side, make it a year-round device.
Right.
Just a question.
Yeah, it's a good question. All right.
Okay, we'll get an answer on that for next week. All right, we want to touch on roads. We got the voice here.
Yep. Chris, you're up. You have, see him? I think Heidi sent, to those of you online, I think Heidi sent some packets out for you.
Did you?
I emailed it.
Well,
Sending out.
he's
Later today
Thank
and earlier today?
Yeah, I can.
Go for it when I came in.
Yep,
Oh, okay.
in your emails.
Yeah, it's probably in my email, but I'm here, so. Yes, I will.
One's 21, 22, 22.
Oh, wait a minute. What do we got? 2 different.
So,
Thank you, Chris.
Mike, if I can just kick this off.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So
Already have this.
this is the kind of planning tool that Chris and Bill started for fiscal year 22 and kind of built upon. I think what he's prepared here, what we've gone through is kind of a revision of where we are currently for fiscal year 22. The biggest impact we had was an inability to get to a lot of the roads we wanted to because of the pandemic and supply chain issues that prevented us from doing certain work. So you'll see some of these are kicked to fiscal year 23. Some we are certainly still planning on doing this year. We actually had a road that we were going to do in 23, I think got reprogrammed to 22. So they're doing all that normal reevaluation that they normally do. And then there's a tentative with emphasis on tentative or preliminary plan for fiscal year 23 and how to, what would be programmed based upon what we know right now and what, short of there being any unknowns. So with that, you want to speak, Chris, to the plan at least first, and then you can also, Chris, I know in prior meetings they've asked about the approach for doing our, we have in the budget to do the PCI analysis. Maybe talk to that and the plan for that going forward. Thanks.
So as Ken presented, we unfortunately have roads that we weren't able to get to. So we have slated for the remainder of this year on the first plan. Roads we plan on targeting. We have now acquired our materials to tackle those roads. We have orders ahead to get those materials in and progress forward. As you look on that, really in the 22-23 budget, in that we're carrying those funds forward that we're projecting not to spend, bring that into the matrix of what roads we're looking at, and we've plotted them out. Currently, we've purchased the excavator, so we perform the drainage install in-house with our own staff. We were able to offset significant expenditure and look at that and paying back that piece of equipment over a few years. It's actually hugely versatile for other aspects of our functions and services. It assists other departments. So, and in that, we are discussing with our vendor who has done the PCI road analysis. We're looking to, projecting to do that in the fall after we complete this this segments of roads, if you will. We're gonna have to go through, obviously, and do the pricing and such like that as well for verification because of the purchasing policy. But that we intend on doing that in the fall.
So you're going to use VHB again?
That's the plan.
Okay.
Purchasing policy.
That's the pricing.
Yeah. I mean, we'd like to keep apples, absolutely, but we're in the process of that, so. Any questions from anybody specifically?
So.
Yeah, Chris, let me just ask a quick question on going forward right now with what you're seeing, supplies and equipment and that, you're comfortable that you can reach these roads and this level of spending?
Currently, I mean, clearly you see we've brought money forward from the current fiscal year. I think pursuing another 2 to get us in that position as well. We feel comfortable. It's extremely aggressive, let's be honest, just because it's a carryover, but that's
right. So I guess that's first of my questions is, do you think you can actually accomplish this? And if we wanted to do more, would it be possible, or is this pretty maxed out?
This is quite maxed out as is. I mean, doing more and throwing more money at it, yes, you will get stuff done. However, because we're doing it in-house, we've taken our forces and committed to a dedicated drainage crew. Previously, we had contractors in. We have to support them. We have to inspect them. We have to provide. So at that point, you're almost 2 for 1. Spend 2, get 1 kind of a situation. Just because our projection, you're at least at 50% of the overall pave cost. You're looking at that right now. Right now, we're at a 38% roughly. Our in-house staffs for materials. With the price increase for asphalt itself is at least 8% just in the base product. Then when you're looking at what the oil escalation, which is a percentage of oil in each class, you're going to become cost prohibitive at that point, where we're not as productive as we are
diminishing returns, as I would assume, right?
Yeah, very well put.
So
now, once this is done, let me finish up one more thing, Stephen. I'll turn it over.
I want to stay on what you were talking about, but go ahead.
So once this batch is done, would we be going out for a new inspection at that point?
Absolutely. We're looking for the coming fall to run the road inspection. And part of that would be, as we have had in the past, a report, a plan, a projection of the road classification, yes. And that plan will provide us further clarity and direction after a few years of work.
And that drives your next 4 years.
As we're using it now, correct. That drives our.
Okay, that's all I got. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I wanted to talk about this work that requires town personnel. So my first question is, have we completed a study of all of the drainage in town? Not done it, not replaced it. Have we finished studying it so we know which ones need to be replaced?
The overall drainage inspection in the global town has not been done. That was not something that was because of the cost element, which is why we did procure, speaking with Board of Finance and Council, we procured our own inspection equipment so we can perform that, because we had roads in the beginning of this. And part of the original study we did, the hugely cost prohibitive to inspect all of the drainage in town. And that was part of the initial discussions. So we took from that the analysis just in the pavement condition itself. We paved some roads. We unfortunately had some issues because we didn't look at the drainage. So now, before we pave, based on PCI, its condition, based on community outreach and communication, we evaluate the roads, we look at them, we know where we have issues, we're constantly recurring potholes, constantly recurring issues with the drainage. We inspect that internally, and we can determine and provide that as part of our calculation, which is what is part of this run and plan. We've looked at that drainage. We know what we need to replace.
My concern is that the answer you gave Mike, the answer you gave Mr. Maurer of the council, immediately goes to our need to do in-house and our ability to do in-house drainage repair. But my question is, if we gave you more money to do just asphalt on a road like my road, there was a 54 in 2019 that was built in 1992 and probably doesn't have any of that metal drainage in it. If it was inspected now, if all of the roads were inspected now, could you not turn loose with additional money, an additional paving crew, because you wouldn't have to wait 2 years, 3 years to find out whether or not there's a drainage issue on the road? So to me, the entire process starts with, do we have a drainage issue on a given road? And until we can answer that for every road in town, we are leaving, in my view, and you tell me if I'm wrong, we are ignoring roads that might be able to be repaved because they don't have drainage issues, because we don't know whether they have a drainage issue.
So I can understand your position. The drainage issues will in essence show themselves. And when we look at we have roads that are in the 30s and the 40s.
I know we do.
Those are the roads that
I'll get to that in a
we're
minute.
looking and targeting and bringing up. I mean, it just that doing that global view and doing that overall inspection is not to get the whole town done at that pace, to look and have that evaluation. That's an outside source type of activity. That's not something that could be globally done to process that thought analysis and target roads to have that. That would be something we'd have to go out for.
Well, you'd have to come and tell me what the cost is, but my view is until we actually understand all of the roads, I don't think we're doing an optimized process. That's just my opinion, because you can't make a decision as to whether you want to do my road that's going to be less than a 50 now, and is nowhere near the worst road in town. I'm using it as an example. You can't consider doing my road till it's studied. And there's got to be dozens and dozens and dozens of roads that have the same situation. And I don't think we're spending.
But don't we already have enough in the queue already so like if he's got a queue that's fully loaded right now and he's got enough money because of the carry forward to cover that queue, wouldn't it make more sense to wait for the study to come out in the fall and then make a decision?
But Mike, the study's not going to study the sewers. That's the problem. The study is going to tell you that my road dropped another 5 points or 6 points or 7 points like it did in the prior 4 years. That's all the road study's going to tell you. And it's not going to help him put it on the list for the next year or the year after, because he hasn't studied the sewer.
Can I jump in here, please?
Sure, please.
I think you're missing the point.
Okay.
We don't do roads based on drainage. We do roads based on PCI.
I got it.
And that's what it is. So when we come up with a road with a bad PCI, say 39, we look at the drainage and say, does this drainage need to be replaced? Yes or no? Maybe it's all concrete pipe. We're not touching it. Then we can move on. And that road gets paved. And so forth and so on. So we don't basically stress on drainage as much as we do the pavement index.
Okay, so let me, and that makes perfectly good sense. So have you analyzed all the roads that are 0 to 50 in the?
We have
Start at the worst.
working on it. Now you got to understand, it's a living document.
And
so what happened 4 years ago, these roads have decreased, much like East Village. If you look at the PCI on East Village Road, you'll go, why are you guys paving this road? But if you go out and drive East Village Road, you're going, oh my God, what did you guys do? You left this road alone. Yeah. It depends on the way the road. You can't get a lot out of asphalt today. 10, 12 years, maybe 50, and if you're lucky, that's it. There's no more 25 years in a road. It's not happening. So we look at the roads, we evaluate. VHB gives us a 2 to 3 year plan. We look at that. The 4th year, we're on our own. We're looking at the roads that are basically so dilapidated and they're probably, should have been done a year before, but we are going by the 3-year plan. And certain roads we look at and we go ahead, much as Pepperidge. Pepperidge, we have to get to because it's bad and we're going to do it. So that's how we kind of do it. We follow what VHP says, then the 4th year we look at the roads that, oh my God, we really got to get to this now. And the drainage comes along with that. We don't say, hey, the drainage is shot on that road, let's go do it and we'll.
Correct, but you know today what your worst roads are. So you could go out either in-house or with a contractor and say, I want you to survey all of these roads that are in this PCI. And once you've got that data, you pick the range. Then you know what you have to do for the next X number of years.
Well, I think we have that, Steve. We have that. We do that because what we do is we just don't do the lowest PCIs. Like, it'd be great if I pick I could say, okay, so here, we have 38 to 49 we're going to do. But now what happens to the roads that are 78 and 68? They start to come down. So we have to be able to do different procedures on different roads.
And I agree, because that's the keep the good roads good methodology, which is the industry standard. So I understand that, and I am not in any way suggesting that you not do that.
And I
don't like hearing that we can't get to roads because we're held up doing sewers, but yet we know there are roads that could be done if the sewers were analyzed.
Well, let me just clarify that a little bit. For the most part, Steve, the roads that we are doing fall right into the category that we have to do the drainage. There's been very, very small amount of roads that we've done where we said, we don't have to touch the drainage on that. Maybe one, where it's been concrete pipe and it's been in good shape. For the most part, we're finding corrugated metal that is falling apart.
On all those
it's gone. And this is not just in Monroe, this is an industry problem throughout. And that's what it is. And that kind of lends to the fact why I can't get plastic pipe, pipe. Not only is it the supply chain problem and the rest, but everybody's trying to buy it because everybody's running into this.
Yeah, and see, that's the other reason that I get concerned about the dependency on drainage. If you went and studied my road and you said, my road doesn't need drainage.
What was your road look like? I'm sorry, Steve.
Well, it was a 54 in 2019. I'm using it as an example. My point is that if you don't have the manpower to do more drainage work, if you don't have the supply chain to get more pipe, if you had studied my road and known that it doesn't need drainage, then you could take and add it to an asphalt only list. And with either the existing money or with additional money, you could go out and do that. And I've got to just believe that there's a number of roads that don't have a drainage issue that could be done if we knew what the drainage situation was.
But I don't want to spend money on a road that doesn't need to be paved. In other words, so most of the roads that we're attacking with the drainage, where there's drainage problems,
they're worse than mine. I got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I can do is I will engage through VHB and we'll pull some numbers together for an overall town. We had that before discussion in the onset of this.
And that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to
integrate that conversation and understand what it looks like.
Okay, so I think we beat this one to death. I've got a couple other questions, if I could. Are we working toward, do we have any set of objective measurements that we're using to measure how well we're doing? Do we have a PCI target overall that we're trying to get to, for example? Do we have we want X number of miles of roads, within various PCI ranges, or any other metrics that we would use to measure how effective our program is?
So in that, when we had the latest or the most recent discussion from VHB, they did discuss that. Part of that being our current position is a 75, and this is their business, right? So they can speak to Connecticut, to communities and many other states. 75 is a fantastic number. Not many communities are really above that. If we can hold that and kind of fluctuate and run up and down beyond that, that's fantastic. Clearly a lot better than the 64 we were in.
But nowhere near the 85 that we've been.
But in 85, realistically though, we have a lot of historical things we need to address. All the drainage. When we're opening up these roads, we're seeing that we just don't have the thickness that was supposed to be there. So we have some characteristics in there that, we often talk about it, is the work we do now sets up the town for the future, sets up the next folks that run the department for the future. And a lot of communities do a mill and pave. That's kind of the run. New asphalt, it's great, it's beautiful, whatever, right? Can't do that right now because I've personally run the crews and had Purdy Hill Road. We milled the road into dirt. I took all the structural out of it, unfortunately, and it just became, because we didn't do the drainage, so I couldn't tell when we look, because that's also another benefit of doing the work. But we will get there to a point where, yes, all we may need to do is just asphalt overlay. We've got some other methods in here as well this year to address, if you will, roads like yours that are just in good shape, decent shape, keep them good, extend the bell curve, and run the life expectancy out longer. Granted, it's money, but it's really not as expensive as it is to pay. So.
All right. Yes, and I'd like to see you do that. And if that needs more funds, I'm for it. Do you happen to know how many center lane miles of road that you've actually studied the storm drains on?
I couldn't quote. Yeah, I'd have to quote that. I can't quote that off.
We have roughly 100. We have roughly 143 center lane miles.
We do since how much have we done?
Yeah, roughly.
What year? Roughly, we're about 5 a year, so 6 years.
Let's say we've probably covered close to 30 miles of road.
30 out of 140.
Yeah, from
43. Okay.
And guys, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to have to jump here. I got to go run to my dinner, but you guys seem to have this under control. Rebecca, you can finish it up for me and let me know if there's anything else you need or text me.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
So that was my budgetary question. I've got a technical question. You have the roadway management software here, right? No? Where do we track the PCI and stuff for the roads and figure out what we're going to do? We don't use any roadway management software?
No, we don't. We did not take that on as part of the
Never took it
program.
on?
Because the reason for that is you can plot out all the scenarios you want, but that scenario, again, we didn't have the drainage study done.
Mm-hmm.
So in running those scenarios, it's skewed without even starting because you're not taking into consideration.
So is VHB the only one that has that data stored? The historical data, the PCI data, and the analysis?
It's who we've used consistently throughout, so they do have that data. And that was the driver for not taking on the data or the software.
Okay. So I have a request. Can you ask them if they still have the raw 2010 data? I've tried to we apparently don't have copies of the 2010 road report, but I would really like to know if we can get the raw data from what would be Appendix A or has been Appendix A in the following years. My guess it's in their system because in their 2019 report, they put a chart in there.
I thought we asked this a prior year, and it might have been from a request.
It was a request.
Was there some issue where there was a change in system or something? I recollect trying to find this, and it was.
Yeah, so what I had done.
I may not be.
What I asked you, Ken, was could we get a copy of the report?
Maybe that's.
And I'd asked your predecessor the same question, and I'd been told, no, we don't have a copy of the report. Nobody's got a copy of the report. I'm taking a slightly different tack. In their 2019 report, they have a chart that has the number of miles in different ranges of PCIs. They have it for 2010, 14, and 18. The fact that they have those numbers for 2010 in the aggregate leads me to believe that they've either got a spreadsheet or they've got their roadway management software with 2010's data in it. And so my request would be, do they have a spreadsheet or the tool where they could regenerate the road list from 2010?
Yeah.
That's my request to you, if you could take it back to them.
We'll write that down specifically. And
I appreciate it. And guys, let me just say, I appreciate your work. I'm not really trying to give you a hard time. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to do more, to be prepared to do more. I keep reading their reports. I keep seeing the numbers in their reports about the amount of cost, and their costs don't even include the drainage. And I'm just trying to get my hands around how we're ever going to get, quote unquote, caught up in what that means, because the numbers are, the number of miles of roads and the number of dollars is just gigantic. And doing $1 million or $2 million a year, I just don't know how we get there while all the roads are declining and the costs for doing, asphalt keep going up. That's my bottom line concern. So, again, thank you. I do appreciate your work.
I'll talk with VHB and we'll connect with Ken. Good. Anybody else?
The first part of East Village looks great.
Yeah, right. If we had pipe, we would have gone further. That's one of our two targets, is that coverage. So.
Oh, the other end of East Village? Now I actually bypass it and go 111 to 34, which 111 is the state road and they have that issue.
Oh, very much so.
So let me ask one other technical question. Garter Road from Pepper to Applegate. It was paved in 2013.
Right.
It was crack sealed in 2019, I believe. Based on the keep the good roads good, what do you do next? Do you put a slurry seal or a cape seal or something on it? Or what are we doing to keep the good roads good?
In keeping the good roads good, clearly we're rerunning the evaluation of the roads. We look at the roads and we crack seal the roads. That's part of our fall and our spring reval for every fiscal year. We know it's in good condition. It's one of our, not top roads, but the roads we've done are the roads we look at first to help maintain them. Because the worst thing you can do is get water into a road.
Right.
I mean, you get the freeze thaw and you get issues. But we also look at the characteristics ourselves in-house. Do we have any spalling? Do we have any segregation? Is it showing signs of something else going on, wear, tear, have you? And that's where we may look at a different type of application. That road in specific, those types of applications with the traffic count aren't meant for a high volume road. It may look good, but the life expectancy of it, ROI, is horrible for that type of a road. So if it got bad enough, we'd look to repave that road, overlay the road depending. We do probably cores and go from there to see how thick, we know how thick we roughly have it, but we'll evaluate it in that aspect.
Okay.
Is there a problem?
No, you did the crack seal as soon as it showed up. There are some, because that was a center line crack.
Right.
There are some crossroad cracks showing up. You can see it when it rains, but I was just wondering more as the technical issue of keeping the good roads good. What would you do with that kind of road? And
Right.
Okay.
As long as the pavement's good, Steve, you just keep crack sealing it. You
Okay.
don't keep that done. You don't necessarily have to do a treatment on it right away because the road surface is good and the way the road is draining as well.
It is.
So you don't really have to do anything. The biggest problem with that road is the tractor trailers coming through on Garter Road.
Tell me about it.
That is the biggest problem. I don't understand why tractor trailers want to use a dirt road, but they do. And it's killing Garter Road.
Very much so.
Yeah, it's killing me. I remember when I see them racing down there and I'm going, somebody's going to get killed at that one of these days. The truck coming around the intersection with Applegate, that blind curve. And I'm like, it's going to happen.
Yeah, I remember our budget used to be about 500,000 and that was patching, that was crack sealing, that was paving roads, that was every single thing. And we're in a good spot to fund it well and do the maintenance we need to do. So, but like I said, we'll evaluate the VHB.
Yeah,
Get your
I mean,
information.
I've got, I've got my history right here. You want some data?
Okay. Anybody else?
Thanks, guys. I do appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, have a good night. Thank you.
You too.
All right, guys.
Capital we talked about. You know what Mike meant by revenue accounts?
Well, I think,
Or think he's not here, we should just push it off?
I think, yeah, I mean, when I had originally talked to Mike about things he wanted to try and get to, we kind of were moving things around. I mean, that's probably perfectly fine to punt that to the next meeting unless you guys want to, just want to wait until he's back.
No, I didn't have anything prepared. I wasn't sure exactly what you wanted to talk about.
I think it was just,
think it was just
the
gonna be a
usual
review.
review of the revenue lines in the budget, kind of that normally.
Yeah.
Go through and just
detail.
kind of analyze the thought process and we think they're good assumptions basically, so. But Rebecca, did you want to hold off on that? It was really just kind of like see how much you could get to, so,
Yeah, I think so. I think that makes sense.
okay. So, I'll update this, throw that into the April 7th list of things.
Okay.
And the last thing, Rebecca, that I think we have to discuss, if not tonight, offline, is the meeting on the 14th. I had indicated earlier on when we were juggling the calendar that I might not be able to make the 14th. I know now that I will not be able to make the 14th. We talked about Friday being Good Friday. It's also the start of the first night of Passover. It's also school break. And I wonder whether other people are going to have issues on that Thursday. Maybe we can move it back, move it earlier in the week.
So, Steve, this is Mary. I can't do earlier in the week. I was going to ask, because I'm not going to be available next week, and I've written to all of you and indicated
Yes.
that to you. So it's unfortunate I'm not going to be able to understand the revenue piece, but I'll have to catch up. I was wondering if we could move the 14th to Monday, the 18th. Because I think that's, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's when we would vote, and it has to go back to Ken on the 20th.
Yeah, the 20th is the last date that you have to vote on the budget.
So
Yeah.
my question is, so April, what are we talking about? April 18th.
April 14th is the Thursday, 18th is the Monday.
Yeah.
So is that not a Board of Ed meeting? But I don't have it on my calendar.
Is that school break weekend, maybe?
Oh, maybe
Yeah,
they're
it's spring
still
break.
off. That Monday, a lot of school systems, I don't know about ours, are off. Do you run those?
Yeah, that's spring break that week.
And just as a point out, not that it would not, it's virtual, so it wouldn't conflict with room, but that is the evening of the cultural humility training that I sent out to the chairs. Mike probably hasn't forwarded it out to you guys yet, but it's an optional thing that I'm offering everybody. So if you're thinking of attending that is that.
On Monday night?
Yes.
So does Tuesday night, well, now we're pushing it.
Yeah.
So Mary, you're not available at all on the week of the 11th?
No, because I am going to be in the mountains out west, and I don't know what kind of connectivity I'm going to have. But on the 18th, I will be at a place on the West Coast where I can do a Zoom.
What time is your
5:30 to 7:30.
And I will not be able to make the revenue meeting next week. Next week, I'm completely out of pocket. And the 11th, 12th, and 13th, that's why I was hoping we were going to keep it at the 14th, even though it's Holy Thursday. I can do it from the car because I know I'll have connectivity.
Well, I mean, the other thing is if there's a cultural program that runs till 7:30, there isn't anything that says we can't start our meeting at 7:30.
Certainly could.
I mean, we could do it on the 19th. I mean, it only has to be to the first selectman on the 20th. Now, unless that puts a burden on you guys, that's not reasonable.
No, it's,
No,
I mean, the only,
I think Monday's better. I mean,
no, I'm just thinking out loud here. I mean, the only.
That's what I'm asking.
The only risk on, as you get closer is, unknowns of,
It's not going to be a snow day.
yeah, it's true. At least it's April. Well, you never know.
Well, I mean, these guys have to do the final preparation. I mean, even if we do it live.
Yeah.
But I mean, help me, Steve and Rebecca, because this is my first time through this, okay? And unfortunately, I've got a long-term cross-country trip that's been planned for a couple of years that that we've been in the planning for. So what do we do on the vote? Do we go through each department?
No, so. No, basically by then, that night, if there's any odds and ends that we need to button up, there'll be a relatively small handful of accounts or issues. And then there is a pre-prepared list of motions. It's several pages long and it covers all of the revenue items, the expense items, the capital items. And basically, we just have to fill in the dollar values right then and there that we get from Ron and Heidi if we've made any changes. And everything else is pre-printed, and we fill in the blanks and we rotate between all of us making the motions. But again, the beginning of the meeting is buttoning up any small odds and ends, and sometimes it's virtually nothing.
Okay, so
it's basically
I
a vote around.
can do the 18th and or the 19th. I'm fine with. I mean, and I can do the 14th.
What was the issue with the 14th? I forgot.
Yeah,
Well, I know I won't be here, and
Steve can't do the 14th.
Other
Steve-
people.
What's that?
And Rebecca, do we all need to be there for that? Do you have to have a quorum?
you have to have a quorum.
A
Okay.
quorum, sure.
Okay.
So a quorum means we only have to have 4 of us.
I could do either of those days.
Yeah, I can do the 18th or the 19th. I think, Rebecca, what we ought to do is run it by Mike and.
Yeah, I'd like to give, I'll text him and I'll send him, kind of a summary of what we discussed as far as meeting times, see what his availability is. And then I think he'll coordinate with Ken to make sure there's, time and space available.
Yeah, given Ken's program, which we're going to be invited to apparently, I would say Monday, the 18th would be 7:30 and Tuesday, the 19th would be 6 or 6:30.
Right.
Yeah, it just went out today. That's why he hasn't probably sent it out.
No, that's fine.
So, okay, so we're on for the 7th and, assuming we may change the 14th TBD.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Rebecca, you'll know that I'm not going to be there on the 7th.
Yeah, I made a note of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just so I can get it into my calendar, what is your meeting on the 18th at 5:30?
It is a training seminar on cultural humility that all town employees are going through, and I'm offering to appointed and elected members as well to attend. So I'm sure Mike will get that out to you. Not that I don't have you, I just, for purposes of logistics, I just sent it to the chairs of each group and said, send it to your, because I don't want to miss anybody, so figure they have best way to communicate.
Yeah, that's great. I got it in the calendar, just,
Yeah, placeholder for that. Yep. Okay,
All right. Any other questions or concerns?
Nope. Steve Kirsch, motion to adjourn?
have a second?
Second.
All right.
All right, have a good night.
Without objection,
Thank you.
thanks, guys.